In a previous one of these quick tutorials, I described how I build a minibus, how I use it, and how I build the machines. Someone rightly asked in the comments what I would actually put on the minibus. Okay, so first thing to note about using these is I wouldn't actually normally have 4 belts on either side. Typically I start off just with 2 belts. We also don't know where the material is going to be, so the advantage this design is it's nice and generic, as I mentioned in the previous minibus tutorial, both generic in terms of the build but also generic in terms of we can put anything on any belt here. But we don't know where that's going to be, so we will take these inserters off for the time being. So the question is, what do I actually put on this minibus typically to start with? So we've got the 4 belts here. How do I actually feed the material in? Well, first off, and I've been doing a series of quick tutorials that explain how to make the actual fundamental materials, and these are up here. So we have a full belt of iron, a full belt of copper, a belt of stone brick. It's full in the sense that this has been sat here making stone brick for ages, but it's actually not a balanced array. I've just used the same exact design. You would actually halve this. It requires double the material to make the same amount. And then we got steel, and again this is backed up, so it looks like it's full, but it's actually only a fifth of a belt of steel. So these are the fundamental things that we're going to feed in. Okay, but we need several other important materials that I usually put on the minibus. Now you don't have to put these on the minibus. You've got 4 lanes here, as you can see. You could put the 4 in. The stone brick is particularly useful because you will be using that for walls, so it's good to have that moving around, but a few other things like chemical plants and stuff use them as well. Similarly, stone is something that you will probably have a use for, but you can make a debate on it. What I normally therefore do with the stone and stone brick is to half belt them, and I do that very simply by what we're actually going to do is slightly weird, but we're going to filter this down to stone, okay, and then we're going to feed in this one and this one, like that. So we know out of this side we are only going to get stone, and what we do then is we put the stone brick and stone together like so. And that gives us, oh sorry, I polluted that belt, I did something accidentally. But that gives us a half and half belt of stone and stone brick. The other thing we want is some of the intermediate materials. Now what we want really is some pipes, some gears and some green circuits. Now what I typically do is have a production area. Now where you put this is kind of, just wherever is convenient. But I'm literally just going to build it on the bottom here. And all we're going to do is we are going to put in a very simple production of a handful of iron gears and steel pipe and iron pipes. Okay. What I'm actually going to do is slightly offset it and use long-handed inserters. Okay. In order to put them onto the other belt. And I'm going to use my standard thing of putting inline power poles. So we now have the iron belt coming through, and we want slightly more gear wheels than we do iron pipes. And we can feed that like that, and that like that. Now we then put a second belt along the side here that we put the outputs on. There we go. So we've now, oh, I put it on the wrong side, apologies. So we've now got a belt that contains iron gear wheels and iron pipes. We've also still got our iron plate. What we also need to do is build green circuits. Now they're made from both copper and iron, slightly more complicated build, and I'm just going to fit them in here, I think. So a lot of this is more for demonstration purposes, and it is a kind of thrown together build because the whole point of this system is that I build it quick and dirty and get things rolling. This is the very definition of a starter base, we are anticipating using this in order to make whatever we want to do, be that factory towns, city blocks, bus, whatever approach we're taking. This is the way we get materials to make it. It also provides a way of making very early game science. The trick we can use with green circuits is, what I'm actually going to do, I think, is kind of have these going along here maybe. Yeah, so what we can do with green circuits, which are, I call them green because I tend to use the colour names, which apologies if you are colourblind, but they're the electronic circuits, the very basic material. Now, I've been mentioning in some of my tutorials as well, something you need to get used to is ratios. Now, you don't have to be full on everything is in ratio, and there are some tricks you can play as well with how you do it. But what I would typically do with green circuits, with basic circuits, is a build like this. The reason we do this is that the maths is kind of, it means that it's perfect ratio. Now, a green circuit, an electronic circuit, takes half a second to craft. Okay, so if we want to provide this with exactly the right number of copper cables, we would need to provide 3 copper cables every half a second. But one machine only produces 2 copper cables every half a second. So in other words, one electronic circuit requires the output from 1.5 machines. So therefore, if we do 2 electronic circuit machines, then they need 1.5 plus 1.5 equals 3 machines. Therefore, if we provide all of the output from that one and half the output from that one to there, and all of the output from that one and half the output for that one to there, then that will be matching. Now, why have I put extra inserters on? You know, because obviously we need to halve and half that one, but this one is double. Well, the reason for that is because it's a 1 to 2 recipe. So if this is putting 1 copper cable in, it's taking 2 out. And without bonuses and what have you, these will operate very slowly. So the doubling up of the inserters across there accounts for that doubling up, basically. What we also need to provide these guys with is some iron plate. We can do that in several ways. I'll put those inserters on the wrong way around. But basically, if we take our iron plate line here, do a split, and send that up there, then that will give us the iron plate we need. And to output it, we can simply do a long-handed and put it on some belt there. Now, typically, I do 2 of these, so you have to put in quite a lot of power bars, unfortunately, because of the small reach, which I always find very, very messy. In fact, yeah, put one in there. I normally do 2 of these arrays. We'll just connect this up, get it working. At the very start of the game. So we've got 4 iron pipe now. Sorry, 4 iron gear wheels. Now these, it's not going to be providing the iron plate at the speed it needs, because this is such a quick recipe and requires so many resources. The yellow inserters, which is what you'll have at the beginning of the game, aren't quick enough. So that's why I put 4 on. It compensates for the fact that most of these will be idle half of the time. Whereas the iron pipe, you know, only requires 1 iron plate, so they're just about able to cope. Again, with these, we have slowness of the inserters, you know, causing us problems. But basically, 4 green circuits will give us plenty, because an electronic circuit only takes half a second to craft. So 4 of them in 1 second will make 8 electronic circuits, which is half of a belt. Okay, so that's my sort of logic for doing that, but you can build it however you want. So we bring the iron plate to there. Now we've got half a belt of green circuits. We've also got 1/5 of a belt of steel. Okay, so why don't we combine those 2? Okay, so that's our half and half belt of iron plate. Now I'm breaking a lot of my own rules. You know, I've mentioned before about not going around the back of machines and not building them, always using the in and out design. But at this stage of the game, and I say I probably wouldn't actually build them like this. I'll probably build it on the side here and make it a bit more like a normal sort of build. But for the purposes of demonstration, this is kind of what we're going to end up with. So therefore we now have the remains of the copper, whatever copper we've not used, the remains of the iron, whatever iron we've not used, the iron and gear half belt, the stone brick and stone half belt, like so, and then the circuits and steel plate belt. Now that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, we want quite a lot of this iron and copper to go into these other productions, so we can combine this one as well. Do that there. So this is very messy. But yeah, it's for demonstration purposes only. Therefore, what we can do is have these all go directly into our minibus. Okay. So I would normally plan where I'm going to have the minibus, and I do a thing where I snake it round. But here we have all of the bits and pieces heading in to our minibus. Now, we then go through, when we're building these machines, we go through and we say, well, what does it need? It needs circuits. Obviously, it needs the transport belts, which that's why we set it up like this, so that it could grab those from the actual machine that's making them. And then we've got iron plates. So what we need to do is put an inserter on to grab iron plates, and one to grab gears. This is iron plates and gears, so we just grab iron plates and gears. And this is iron plates and belts, so all we need to do is put that on there. And now you see we have a nice, fairly reliable production of transport belts, splitters and undergrounds. Now, very early game, one of the reasons I do this, one of the reasons I use this minibus design, is that almost everything uses these ingredients. It uses a bit of steel, a bit of green circuits, a bit of iron plate, copper plate, You can obviously easily convert copper plate into wires. That's a commonly used one. You can convert iron plate very easily into iron sticks and simply feed them in directly. So they don't really need to be on the bus. They're used very infrequently, and they're not very efficient to transport around on belts. So you can make those locally. But otherwise, this pretty much gives you everything you need. As I say, if you combine it with having machines feeding into each other, so taking that and putting it into something else, say that was the red undergrounds or something like that, then it would feed those in as you need them. Yeah? So that's the type of approach I use the minibus, and these are the materials I put in. Half a belt of iron and copper, because we use half a belt or a bit more than in order to make the gears, pipes and green circuits. And then those gears and pipes go on one belt, and then the circuits go on the belt with steel, and then we have a stone and stone brick line. That's a bit more optional, that's a bit more as you need it. Generally speaking, I play with biters on, so I want walls, and that's a good way of producing walls in very large volumes, is just have them in there. And then when you're coming to military science, you've got them already, and you can just either feed them in directly or move them around. So yeah, that is how I actually feed a minibus. If you want to find out more about the minibus, then there is a tutorial linked on screen that explains how I built that, how I set that up. Otherwise, I've been Trismegistus, and this has been a Factorio quick tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it.